All right, what's up, everybody? How we doing? Let some folks trickle in here while we go over what everyone's drinking. I don't know what this glare is. That's the production quality that we've all come to love here on Hops with Pop. I don't really know what to do. I cleaned my camera off. Maybe I go back a little bit. Is that better? No, it's worse. All right. If that gets too annoying, I'll try and maybe turn the light off. That could work better. Should we try it? Should I try and shut it off? I'll let you guys decide. All right. Yeah. We're not here to, we're not here for the production quality. We're here to talk some ball. All right. I am drinking Firestone Walker 805. There is a Firestone brewery down the street from me, but I believe it's a San Diego brewery. Paso Robles. I learned that actually. It's not Paso Robles. It's Paso Robles. Fun fact for everybody. So we'll let some people trickle in here. I was a little late with some of the promo, getting the link out because I'm cooking tonight, making falafel and homemade hummus and Israeli salad in pita. And the hummus was taking a little bit to get the seasoning right. So we're a little behind schedule. However, we always start here with what everyone is drinking. So let's see while people trickle in here. Got a bunch of 805s in the Chad. If you're drinking an 805, throw an 805 in the Chad. We got a Heineken. We got 4 shots of straight rubbing alcohol, which I'm sure many of you Charger fans out there can relate to. Got Elysian Space Dust IPA and Bullet Rye. Double fisting for Hops with Pop tonight. We've got Rainier Tallboy. I've never had Rainier. Presuming that's a Washington brewery. This light is going to drive me crazy. I'm sorry, guys. Hold on. Let me shut this off for a second. That's much better. It's a little bit weird. I actually have a lamp in here now. Yeah, I like that better. Do we like that better? All right, let's keep going here. Got Bleach on the Rocks. Little dangerous. We got a LaCroix. We got a Lagunitas. 805 Cerveza. Nice. We've got Blake's Hard Cider. Triple Jam. Twisted Tea Raspberry. I saw someone on TikTok mix Twisted Tea whiskey with lemonade, and it looked delicious. Just throwing that out there. Iron Fire 5150. Never heard of that one. We got a Cab Sauvignon in there. We've got Alpine Nelson IPA. Taco Bell Mountain Dew. Nothing better than that. Baja Blast, baby. Hopefully you're eating it with or drinking it with a Crunchwrap Supreme. Best thing at Taco Bell. Taco Bell order is Crunchwrap Supreme, Cheesy Gordita Crunch, 1 Doritos Locos Taco, Baja Blast. Can't go wrong with that order. Broken Skull IPA. We've got Tequila Neat. We've got Homemade Lemonade. We've got Boulevard Whiskey Barrel Stout. That sounds delicious. Great adjustment on the lighting. All right, good. I'm happy we're in better shape here because that was going to drive me crazy. I was going to be in the middle of a take and just lose focus because the light was shining right into my eyes and the screen. All right, Coke Zero. We've got Del Taco is better than Taco Bell. The real ones know. In the chat, let me know in the chat if you remember when I did my Del Taco review. This must have been 2019 when I was still doing my taco reviews. The OGs know. I used to do a taco review every week. And one of the weeks I drove to Del Taco and did it. And it was fine. But you can't be a taco spot. Taco Bell has it's like tacos. The crunch wraps are pretty much tortilla. It's like you got the vibe. Del Taco's like best thing is like their burger, apparently. I don't know. I'm not saying it's bad, but it's just Taco Bell is in a tier of its own. All right. We've got some peeps in the stream. So let's get to it. I am here to answer your questions. I've got nothing off the top here. I really want to spend this time. Obviously, we're not doing these as frequently this year, so I just want to, when I do come on here, just want to make sure I spend the time talking about what you guys are interested in. So throw those questions in the chat, and we'll get to it. What's going on with the pass defense this year? It's a good question. Now, I wouldn't say that it's just this year. Like, in my opinion, this feels like a continuation of the same issues that the Chargers have had since Brandon Staley took over as head coach. Since 2021, the Chargers have given up 55 completions of 30 or more yards. It's the most in the NFL, and they've done that in 36 games, just counting the regular season. So the Chargers giving up explosive passes, getting beat over the top, missing tackles, busting coverages, misplaying coverages, misplaying leverages. That's been a thing throughout Brandon Staley's time as head coach. So I think heading into this season, there were certain expectations about what this defense was going to look like. Year one, you have a bunch of holdover players from Gus Bradley's scheme, which is about as different of a defensive scheme as you can possibly get. Gus Bradley played cover 3 like well over half the time. It was very simple. He wasn't mixing up his looks, his disguises. There wasn't a lot of movement with the defense. It was pretty static. You could look and see pretty much the same setup on every single snap. You had a deep field safety, middle of the field safety, and then you had a strong safety close to the line of scrimmage. You had your 2 linebackers, you had your 4-man front, and then you had your 2 linebackers, and then a nickel, you had your slot corner. And there wasn't a lot of moving pieces. And then, so the personnel was very consistent, and then what they were playing was also very consistent. And then the type of coverage they were playing is also very different. So year one, totally understand that the defense didn't perform. You had a lot, in my opinion, you had a lot of trying to fit square pegs into round holes. That's basically what it was. Year two, and also in year one, I should say that the Chargers really invested a lot of their offseason capital into the offense, and particularly the offensive line. They signed Corey Linsley to a big contract. They signed Matt Filer to a pretty big contract. They drafted Rashawn Slater in the first round. And to their credit, like, that needed to be addressed, and they did address it. Now you head into year two, last year, 2022. That offseason is all about getting Brandon Staley, his players, on defense. They had a ton of cap space, and they spent. They signed Austin Johnson. They signed Sebastian Joseph Day. They traded for Khalil Mack, which takes cap space and cash because they restructured his contract. And you also have to fit that into the cap sheet. They signed J.C. Jackson. They signed Bryce Callahan. They signed Kyle Van Noy. They signed Troy Reeder. They signed Morgan Fox. Like, it was a lot of players on defense, and a lot of those players had previous history with Brandon Staley. And so the vision was, okay, the Chargers spent the most cash of any team in the NFL on their defense last year. And the vision was, okay, we got the offense in good shape. Now it's time to get Brandon Staley his pieces, and it's all going to come together. Now, injuries obviously hit. You lose Joey Bosa in the third game of the season. You lose J.C. Jackson. I mean, he was really a non-factor the whole year. He has ankle surgery in late August. And then, obviously has the severe knee injury in week 7. And you lose Austin Johnson, you lose Tito Ogbonnia, sort of go down the list. The defense never really finds its rhythm last year until the last, 4 games of the season. Now, that rhythm was certainly exciting for the team because it felt like it was all clicking. I think looking back on it now, you had one really good performance against the Dolphins. And then you had 3 performances against really mediocre offenses. 2 mediocre to bad offenses. Nick Foles, Baker Mayfield, And then you had Ryan Tannehill, hurt his ankle significantly. Malik Willis comes in for a series. Tannehill comes back in the game, but he has season-ending surgery like 3 days after the game. So he was like barely able to move. So, in a sense, yeah, it looked good, but I think you have to factor in the competition. And so heading into this year, they'd spent all that money on the defense. Everyone's back and healthy. They make the one move they make this offseason is going to get Eric Kendricks, who they feel like can be a real leader, a communicator, and most importantly, a really stout run defender and tackler sideline to sideline, and somebody who's going to be in the right spot at the right time and can be consistent in that phase of the game. And so ownership has given Brandon Staley everything he could possibly ask for defensively. And so now this is the season where it has to come together. You're a defensive coach. You got this job primarily because you built the best defense in the NFL with the Rams in 2020. And so no more excuses, time for the defense to play. And what we've seen is a lot of the same issues that popped up throughout the first two seasons, which is a lot of explosive plays, and those explosive plays obviously sinking games. And so specifically what's wrong with it, obviously the Dolphins in week one, Mike McDaniel had a really good game plan. And with Ronaldo Hill, obviously on Mike McDaniel's staff, he was the Chargers defensive coordinator for the last 2 years. They were able to really attack a lot of the Chargers rules in certain coverages and put a lot of players into conflict. That was part of it. But as I wrote last week, if you did not see it in my film breakdown, there were also a number of busted coverages. Guys just not playing coverages correctly. Like on the Tyreek Hill, 35-yard touchdown. J.C. Jackson, his job in that defense, quarter, half, quarters to his side of the field. He's the outside corner. He has to play outside leverage, meaning force the receiver inside, play to the outside, prevent the receiver from getting to the outside because his help is Derwin James to the inside of the field. Instead, J.C. Jackson allows Tyreek Hill to release to the outside, and there's no help to that side of the field down the sideline, touchdown. Asante Samuel on the 4th and 7 carries Tyreek Hill to deep off the line of scrimmage. Asante was supposed to be the slot or the flat defender on that play. He doesn't cover the flat. Durham Smythe, the tight end, gets in the flat, first down. Dolphins score later. Now, in the Titans game, the Titans aren't the same offense as the Dolphins, obviously. They're going to run the football, and I think the Chargers really defended the run well. I think a big part of that was obviously how the front played, but I think Kenneth Murray had an outstanding game, and his physicality really came through in terms of how he was attacking Derrick Henry. So they stopped that portion of it, but they busted again on the exact same defensive coverage as J.C. Jackson busted on, and attacking the same player. And that's the big issue. So on the 70-yard bomb to Treylon Burks, when the Chargers were up 11-0, that got the Titans back in the game. Asante Samuel Jr. again allows an outside release from that receiver to that side of the field, to the quarter side of the field, and quarter, half. And his help is to the inside. Safety can't get over. Treylon Burks has a 70-yard catch. End of the game, same defense, just the other side of the field. Michael Davis is the outside corner. He's supposed to have help to the inside. He plays the leverage correctly. And honestly, that's a 50-50 ball that Michael Davis has to make a play on. He gets his finger on it, can't finish the play. Brandon Staley said that the safety to that side, which was Derwin James, probably could have provided a little more. He called it body presence, basically a little more depth on that play to, maybe scared Ryan Tannehill and prevent him from making the throw. But Derwin was up close to the line of scrimmage. There was no help to the inside. Michael Davis was 1-on-1, not making the play. So what I'm getting at here is this is a staple coverage of the scheme. Okay. The Chargers play over Brandon Staley's now 36 games in the regular season. The Chargers have played cover one the most, according to True Media, at over 20%. Their second most played coverage is this coverage. Quarter, half, cover 6. And in the case of Asante against the Titans, and in the case of J.C. Jackson against the Dolphins, you have corners that have been in this system and are making rudimentary mistakes on a staple coverage. And so, it's year 3. All of these players, outside of Eric Kendricks, who didn't even play against the Titans, have been in the scheme long enough where they should not be making these mistakes. So the question is, why are they making these mistakes? How could they still be making these types of mistakes in defenses that you've been practicing, coaching, playing over and over again, over 16% of the time in games since 2021. I can't give you an answer to that question, a definitive answer to that question. Obviously, some of it falls on the players, but in my opinion, some of the blame also has to go onto Brandon Staley as the defensive play caller and effectively the defensive coordinator for this team, because some part of the messaging just is not getting through. And that's really what I think is happening with the pass defense. Now, how do you fix it? You can continue to play defense this way and play all these different coverages and try and disguise and do all of these things. But you're not achieving the primary goal of the defensive philosophy. Okay. From the moment Brandon Staley took this job, like he said, like, we want to defend the deep part of the field. That's what everything about this defense is built off of, not giving up explosive plays. Okay. So if that is your goal, that's your stated goal. Hey, this is what we are going to do. We will take away the deep part of the field. We will put a roof over the coverage, and yet you've still given up more explosive passing plays than any team in the league. There is a disconnect there. Something isn't getting through. Now, at the end of last season, I mentioned that 4-week stretch where they won 4 in a row. Okay. I had players in that locker room tell me, we have simplified this defense. Now, was that a conscious decision to be more simple? No, I don't think that's what it was. What I think happened is, you go through a discovery process early in the season. By week 14, you have a pretty good idea of what your guys can do well, what your guys can't do well. And I think that they leaned into the things that they can do well. But I 100% can tell you that things were more simple down the stretch of last season, and it allowed guys to play more quickly. And that is the biggest difference between when you talk about like defensive philosophies. What Brandon Staley's philosophy is, like, you have to be complex, because if you're not, opposing quarterbacks will have it way too easy, and these guys are way too good, and they will pick you apart. Gus Bradley had the opposite philosophy. And I had plenty of conversations with Gus about this over his time with the Chargers. He believed in simplifying things on defense so that, A, the guys in there could play fast, but also if you had injuries and young guys had to step up, they could adapt and learn quickly and be able to fill that role at a high level. And so, it's a give and take, and there is no correct answer. Like, there are tons of different defensive schemes, but defensive schemes typically fall into one of these two buckets, right? And I'm not saying it's black and white. It's a spectrum. You can be more complex or more simple, but there is certainly, value and logic to the idea that playing more complex is the right way to go, considering how good quarterbacks are. But if it's not clicking and you're continuing to make the same mistakes and you're not achieving what is your stated primary goal, I think there's a disconnect there. And I think that something has to change in terms of how they're approaching this thing. So, long-winded answer, but there we are. Gus never blitzed. That's true. But when you're blitzing, it makes things a lot more complex, obviously. Because typically when you're blitzing, you're bringing a player who normally doesn't rush the passer, doesn't consistently rush the passer. And so that's one less player in coverage that you have to then replace. You can't double team, all those kinds of things. And so there's more moving pieces when somebody blitzes. And it's a risk reward play. If you blitz, you're going to be exposed if you don't get home. And that happened in the Dolphins game. On one of those deep crossing route completions to Tyreek, they brought Asante Samuel Jr. out of the slot on the blitz. He doesn't get home. They play a fire zone behind it, which is effectively, 3 intermediate defenders and 3 defenders in the deep part of the field, kind of like that. And they got cooked because they didn't get home. And when you have a player like Tyreek Hill and you don't get home and you're blitzing, you're going to be exposed in the secondary. So, like, everything about defensive football in general, and then obviously in the NFL, is a give and take on those things. How complex do you want to be? How simple do you want to be? And a lot of that comes down to what's the risk reward factor of whatever your philosophy is, and then also whatever your play call is. And you're trying to find that balance so that your guys can play fast, but you're also making things difficult on the offense. All right. How did I feel when Staley snapped at me? I don't think he snapped at me. I mean, listen, it's part of the job. Like, I've been getting yelled at in press conferences since I was 19 years old. Like, that's just the reality of it. Like, you end up covering a team that's not performing the way that they want to. Journalists and reporters are in a tough spot where they have to ask questions that coaches and players certainly do not want to answer. And you're going to have that. It's inevitable. I know it's part of the job, and I don't feel, honestly, any way about it. It just sort of is what it is. But I will say that, like, obviously that clip went viral and like sort of turned into this big thing. Like, I didn't even ask a question, and I can like show you guys the recording that I have. But I was going to ask a question, but what all I got out of my mouth was, a lot of people wondered, if that Jacksonville, and that's it, 6 words basically. And then as soon as I said Jacksonville, Brandon obviously responded and was passionate, and it's what he had to say, frankly. Like, he's not going to stand up there and say, yeah, like, it's having a huge impact on our team, even if it is. He has to stand up there and he has to support his players. He has to, show everyone confidence and passion. And I think that he did that in that moment. I think it's just a natural exchange that happens in this business. Reporter asks a question that's obviously a little bit of a sensitive topic, and the coach responds in a way that he believes is going to galvanize his group. And show confidence to anyone that needs that confidence, and that's it. That's there's not much more to it than that. So I didn't really, I haven't seen any of these messages in the chat that kind of were sent while I was doing the defense talk. So if I haven't gotten your question, just throw it in again right now, because I'm kind of at the bottom of the chat. Why is Asante Samuel not able to take that next step? I mean, it's kind of what he is as a player, right, guys? Like, you have corners like this in the league that are valuable, right? They take chances, they're instinctive, and they want to go get the football, and that's what they do. Now, corners who play like that typically are prone to mistakes. Whether that's, because they are taking those chances and getting out of position, whether that's something else entirely, more related to the makeup of the player, like that depends. But like, in Asante's case, like, he's excellent at going and getting the football. His ball production is outrageous. But that comes with, certain mistakes that happen. I just think that's what he is as a player, and I still think he's valuable. I think that he's way more confident as a player on the outside. And I think if you missed it, I wrote about it in my story that published this morning. So if you want more details, click the link below and subscribe to The Athletic. We still have a $1 a month deal going. So click the link below and subscribe if you haven't already. But now, basically, Brandon Staley said that they're going with Jasir Taylor at star, at their slot position in their defense, defending the slot, their nickel position. And, Asante played there a lot during training camp and effectively won that job over Jasir Taylor. They gave Asante that role against the Dolphins, but they gave up 466 passing yards. Asante is much more comfortable on the outside. That's where he wants to be playing. And I think Jasir Taylor is capable on the inside at the star position. And so what they're doing now, and what they did in this game, is they moved Asante back to his more natural position on the outside. Michael Davis did not play well against the Dolphins, and I think that factored into the decision as well. And so what you have now is 3 guys that they feel like are starting caliber corners that are going to fight for these 2 spots. Now, the issue is they're doing a rotation right now. And some of that is the competition. Some of that is the fact that JC Jackson is not quite healthy enough to play a full game. Now, what will happen at some point is 2 of these 3 guys will step forward as the pieces, because one thing that I know is absolutely essential to this defense is guys playing together, because they play so much pattern match zone where effectively you are passing off routes and it turns into man after guys the receivers get off the line of scrimmage, but just because you're lined up across from a guy doesn't mean that you're playing him. You're playing in a zone, and then you're picking up the guy that comes into your zone. So if that receiver runs to you and is running a route into your zone, then you take him and it's man. If those two receivers that are maybe side by side end up crossing each other into different zones, then you pick that up. But that requires a ton of communication. More importantly, it requires a ton of understanding about how the guy next to you plays. And so if you're constantly changing guys out, like Michael Davis told me after the game, like, listen, it's really hard to get into a rhythm when you're rotating like that. And that's especially true in this defense with how they play. So I think that settling on two guys on the outside and even further, just settling on a group of three, settling on a group of five that you're going to go with in the nickel package, I think is going to be really important. And I think that needs to happen sooner rather than later. Because let's be real, 0-2, odds are bad. 0-3, odds are really, really bad. It's basically a death sentence. So like you're now in like win now mode. Like they have to win this game on Sunday in Minneapolis. And so like when I say sooner rather than later, I mean sooner rather than later. Chauncey asks, what was with the game-ending drive? Well, Chauncey, I wrote like 1,100 words breaking down every single play in overtime. It's in the link below. So I'm not going to go into detail on that. If you want a full explanation of everything that went wrong from all three plays of the offensive drive to the punt to every play of the defensive drive, all of the details completely broken down, click that link below. $1 a month right now. It's a great deal. It's the best deal you're going to get. It runs out at the end of the month. So hop in now and get the answer to your question right there. What do you think of Herbert's play down the stretch last game? That's going to be my film review this week. So again, I'm not going to go into that right now because I want to save that for my film review, which will be up Thursday morning. I'm going to do a pretty thorough breakdown there of the offense's game in general, because I don't think you can talk about the end of the game without talking about what happened at the beginning of the game. The Titans were getting a ton of pressure, especially Jeffrey Simmons on the interior. And sorry, that was kind of gross. And so that pressure, I think, disrupted Herbert's timing as the game went on. But that's all I'm going to say. So again, subscribe to The Athletic, click the link below, and you'll get a full breakdown of that on the website on Thursday morning. Has Pipkins looked very good? I think Pipkins has been fine. I think his issues are a little overstated. Listen, like he's not a Pro Bowl level tackle right now. He's not an all-pro level tackle. I think he's a good, solid player, like slightly above average tackle. As a pass protector, as a run defender, I think he's a little bit above that. But that's what he is, and that's fine. Like to have an all-pro at left tackle and like a solid starter at right tackle, like you take that every single season. Now, he gave up a couple sacks. The first one was tough. The Autry sack, I haven't been able to watch the film yet because it's not up on NFL Plus. I don't know if Jamari should have been helping on that or not. I'm not sure. I haven't been able to see a good look at it, obviously, on the TV copy. And then, again, same kind of thing on the Landry sack at the end of the game. Landry came inside, and I didn't know if Trey was expecting help there. Regardless, I don't think it's been excellent or even good so far this season. But again, like against the Dolphins, like he was going up against Jalen Phillips on every snap. And I know that Jalen Phillips might not be a household name, but he is, to me, like legitimate top 10 edge rusher in the league. Like he's better than Bradley Chubb. And I think that's why they matched Jalen Phillips up on Trey Pipkins, because they wanted their best edge rusher on the Chargers' inferior tackle. I think like that was obviously part of the game plan. I think Trey is fine. But I think like having reasonable expectations of what he's going to be is also like important. Like still young, still has a chance to develop. He could turn into that, surely. But like, I think right now he's just a solid player. And like, it's not like he's going to go out there and every single game, like Rashawn Slater, like give up zero pressures. I don't think that's a realistic expectation with how good edge rushers are in this league. Why are they throwing fades to QJ and screens to Mike? Offense shouldn't be getting cute. So I agree with you that there have been a few play calls that felt a little cute. The one that really jumps into my mind was that kind of shovel pass to Quentin Johnston in the Dolphins game on 3rd and short. The screen passes to Mike weren't necessarily like an effective play, but that all set up the Keenan Allen touchdown in the second half where they faked the screen to Mike. Keenan faked like he was blocking and then slipped through for a wide open touchdown. So like I'm okay with that because like it's clear evidence that Kellen Moore is like calling plays with a purpose to set things up, which I felt like was lacking with Joe Lombardi. With Quentin Johnston, like I feel like I wrote about this. I feel like I talked about this when I did the Hops with Pop, during training camp, and I'm a little bit like confused about why you guys are surprised about this. He was a very raw prospect coming out of TCU. Obviously, they drafted him for his traits, and they felt like he could develop. Now, we can have a conversation about whether that was the right pick at 21 with what they needed and who was left on the board and all of those things. But like, it was always going to be a process with Quentin Johnston in terms of the mental side of the game for him, the finer details of playing the position, getting lined up correctly. And on top of that, he like had significant drop issues in training camp and the preseason. He does not have reliable hands right now. Now that could change, but that's just like the reality of the situation. So you have a player who has to do some growing in terms of his mental side of the game and his understanding and of route concepts, of play design, of all of these types of things. And you have a player who doesn't have the strongest hands. So like the way they're approaching this is how can we get him in a simplified role where he can play fast and they can get him the football in his hands in easy ways and where he can go and make plays after the catch. Now, the guy above him on the depth chart is Josh Palmer, who has that very high football IQ. He's a good blocker. He's just a solid player and a very reliable player. Good route runner, good hands, contested catch, understands where he's supposed to be and when he's supposed to be there, all of those types of things. So the trust factor is there with the coaching staff with Josh Palmer. The trust factor is also there with Justin Herbert because they've been playing together for 3 years. And so like I felt like I wrote about it. I felt like I talked about it in Hops with Pop, that it was going to be a process with Quentin Johnston and that he's just not there yet to be playing 40 snaps a game. And yet, what happens is exactly what I told you was going to happen. And there's it feels like there's a ton of confusion. So that's, I don't necessarily understand that, if that makes sense. So that's where it is, and it's going to be a process and they're going to sort of figure out how they can use him. Now, a lot of these conversations about like, hey, we're going to figure it out. It's a lot different when you're 0-2, when the stakes are now extremely high and you're digging yourself out of a hole. If you're 1-1 or 2-0, then hell yeah, like throw stuff against the wall, see what sticks. You can experiment, all of those types of things. But that's just not the situation now. And now the stakes are extremely high. And that makes a lot of this tough. So Derek says, what a wasted pick. Again, and I've gone on rants about this before. I'm not going to do a rant right now. Just because a rookie isn't producing in his first 2 games doesn't mean he's a bust, doesn't mean it was a wasted pick. Like, how many of you were saying that Trey Pipkins was a wasted pick, even into like year 3 of his career? Every single one of you. I mean, every single one of you, all 553 of you in here thought that Trey Pipkins was a bust. And if you want to say in the chat that you didn't, I need receipts. Tweet it at me. If you said some tweet sometime like, hey, Trey's going to have a possibility. Now, I wrote about it because Trey got into games in 2021 and 2021 when against I'm trying to rack my brain, against the Chiefs and against the Broncos. Played well, and I wrote a story breaking down his film saying like, hey, he's got a shot. But this is part of the process. Like, not every player is going to come out as a fully realized, polished version. Okay? Now, again, we can have a conversation about if Quentin Johnston was the right pick, but Quentin Johnston didn't ask to get picked at 21 the same way Kenneth Murray didn't get asked to pick in the first round. So like, sometimes it just takes time for these guys to develop. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's a wasted pick. Okay, Mike P says, this is hilarious. Would you like to elaborate, Mike P? Because in Hops with Pop, I can see every single thing posted in the chat, unlike on Twitter where I don't respond. So why don't you explain yourself, Mike P? What's hilarious about this? I'll wait. Mike, you still in the chat? Crickets from Mike P. Ah, laughing at how you were saying the whole fan base was killing Pip. Oh, you were being honest. Okay. My apologies. We're all a little bit on edge here. All right. Let's continue. He answered. All right, everyone get off Mike P's back. I apologize to Mike P. That's my bad. I was a little salty. This is moving. I'm sorry, Mike P. I'm sorry. Poor Mike. I agree. Listen, everyone get off Mike P. He was being earnest. He was being earnest. Okay, let's get back to it. More questions. That's for Mike P. All love, baby. All right. Eckler's status. I don't have anything on Eckler. I can't give you anything there. Now, I wouldn't read too much into like the no timeline thing. Like that is how Brandon Staley is going to answer injury questions this season. You guys should probably get used to it. He's not going to give anything. So every time we ask an injury question, he's going to say no timeline. He's going to say like to be determined, all that kind of thing. So we're not going to get much injury stuff from him. I did not see Eckler at the facility. Wasn't in the locker room. Wasn't on the practice field. All we know now is it was an ankle sprain. He was dragged down from behind. It didn't look great, but he stayed in the game, played another 5 snaps, was pretty gimpy. So that's all I have on that, on Eckler, and we'll know more tomorrow at practice. Anonymous Scout talking about Herbert. I didn't see that. Players' day off today. Yeah, Tuesdays are always players' day off. Mike P says he will gladly be the head coach of the Chargers if need be. On Fan Buzz? What is Fan Buzz? Lack of run game last week, a bad sign going forward? Not at all. Tennessee was the best run defense in the league last year. They still look like the best run defense in the league. Like that, I honestly think that will be the best front the Chargers play all year. I mean, like, just dominant front. Like, really, really good. Jeffrey Simmons is one of the best players in the NFL, full stop. And so, like, you know, heading into that game, like, if you were expecting them to be able to run the ball, I think you were a little bit off. Like, they were never going to be able to run the ball. You know, they needed to really take advantage of that secondary and attack the deep part of the field. And unfortunately, you know, the protection broke down on a number of those third downs. And that was really like the big issue for me offensively. Dotson versus Spiller. I mean, listen, Dotson had a really good training camp. Very coachable, very motivated, and you know, and he's you know, he looked okay in his snaps, you know, against the Titans. And so, you know, I thought Isaiah had a good training camp. You know, I think in terms of who's active, like if Austin's healthy, who's active, you know, that's coming down to special teams because they feel like Elijah Dotson can be that backup returner, which they don't have anywhere else behind Darius Davis. And so that feels like, you know, what's separating them right now when all of the running backs are healthy. And, you know, Dotson got, you know, some more run over Spiller in that Titans game. But that's like, I feel like an open competition. And if Austin's going to miss some time, like those two guys are going to get opportunities. But Isaiah just hasn't really proven yet that he's really a trustworthy, reliable special teams player. He's not a returner, so he has to kind of fill a similar role that Joshua Kelly was filling, as a guy who can play on punt coverage and play on, on kickoff and these types of things. And right now they just have more confidence in Dotson to be that type of player. Is Khalil Mack over the hill? No, he had 6 pressures against the Dolphins. I thought he played really well in the Dolphins game. Again, like for whatever reason, the film isn't up on NFL Plus right now for some reason. So I can't like give you a firm answer of how Khalil actually played in the Titans game without looking back at the film. But he looked good. He looked really good in the Dolphins game. I thought he rushed really well. Played well in run defense. And from just watching live, like I thought he was a factor in the run game. Obviously didn't get home for any sacks or anything like that, but he was in on those packages where Joey Bosa and Tui Pelotu were causing a lot of havoc. So again, got to watch the film, but no, Khalil Mack's not over the hill. Thoughts on Tuli? Since we're on edge rushers right now, I thought he was outstanding against the Titans. Like I felt like when they drafted Tuli that he felt like a high floor player. Really good effort, really strong for his age. Great motor, great bull rush, stout run defender, like a guy that could go in there and really be just a reliable player early on in his career. But what's really jumping out to me right now, and especially in this game with the way that they used him, like he's a disruptor. And I didn't necessarily think that he was going to be that disruptive early on in his career, as a run defender and as a pass rusher. Like he's 20 years old. I think he's still 20 unless his birthday happened. 21. Oh, he turned 21 on September 3rd. So like still 21 years old to be that physically dominant at that age is like pretty scary. Like from what I've seen, like they have a legitimate player there, like a guy who's going to develop into like a long-term starter at edge rusher. And then what's even scarier is that like he doesn't have like a ton of polish or variety in his pass rush toolbox right now. Like it's a lot of just sort of speed to power, bull rush, like get downhill and get after people. But he's working with 2 like fantastic technicians in Khalil Mack and Joey Bosa. So like if he can refine his game even over the course of the season, like you're talking about a really, really good piece. That seems like a slam dunk pick. And I'm honestly like I'm interested to see like him play the rest of the season because I feel like he can really like make an impact as he continues to play more. The O-line pass blocking is not fixed. I mean, again, like I don't know if it's really like valuable to speak in binaries. Like it's either like fixed or not fixed. Like they protected well against the Dolphins for the most part. And then they went up against what I think is the best front in the league. And so, like, is it surprising that they had some pass protection breakdowns? Not really. You still have 2 young players in there at guard. Zion's still a developing player. Jamari Salyer is playing like his first real NFL snaps at right guard. And so, like, I know I wrote that story about Jamari. Like, I think he's going to be fine. But you're going to have some ups and downs with those guys. I still think it's a really good group. I think they just might have had, they went up against a really good front. And I don't think they had like the performance that they were hoping for against a really good front. But that doesn't mean it's not fixed. It means that they had one bad game. Now, like again, it would be a lot easier to talk about some of these things if, and I guess the best way to say it would be less dire talking about some of these things if the Chargers were 1-1 or 2-0. But at 0-2, like it just takes on a little more magnitude, all of these little things, but I'm not worried about the pass protection. Projection of the team's record. I said 9-8 before the season, and I'm sticking with 9-8. I've stuck with 9-8 since May, since the schedule came out. AFC Scout said Herbert can't read defenses. Okay. That's my response to that. Mm-hmm. Any update on Guyton? He's been out on the practice field, like working off to the side, and he has to miss the first 4 games. So no update on that until after week 4. Should Derwin play more deep coverage to stop these big blown coverages? He's been in the deep part of the field, like on some of these long plays. So unfortunately, the solution to this is not, hey, do one thing and everything's fixed. Like, I talked about this a lot at the top, so I'm not going to go into detail again, but like, either you continue to call it the way that you're calling it, and you believe in the defensive scheme and you believe in the philosophy, and you just hope that your coaching gets through the players, or you make a change in terms of how complex you're making the defense. Those are the 2 avenues I see that you can take. And we'll see what they do. But what I can tell you is that Brandon Staley believes in how they play. And I'm confident that he believes that like they're going to come around and start executing the defense as it is constituted in his vision. Like, that's really what I feel like he's going to bank on. Discipline problem. The Sebastian Joseph day one was tough because he had a similar hit on Tua in week 1 and they didn't call it. And then he has almost an identical hit against the Titans and they do call it. So, the roughing the passer stuff is just tough. Like, it's already really hard to play defense in the NFL, and I understand it. Like, from a league perspective, like, you just can't allow quarterbacks to get hit, because if they get hurt, those are your money makers. And so, like, I understand why the rule is what it is. I think that what would be helpful to defensive players, especially defensive linemen, is if they just called it consistently. And it does feel like there are some inconsistencies in how they call it. So, like, in the case of Sebastian Joseph Day, right? Like, he goes and hits Tua in the week 1 game, no call. And in his mind, he's thinking, okay, like, this is kosher. This is allowed. I can do this. And then he does it the very next week, and, gets called. The Kenneth Murray one, it didn't really matter as much because they did convert the 3rd down, but it did give him like half the distance to the goal. Like, I don't know. I don't look at that as like, oh, it's a huge discipline problem. Like, I want, if I'm the head coach of the football team, that's how I want Kenneth Murray playing. Like, I want him getting after people. I want him setting the tone. I want him hitting the quarterback. Like, and it didn't feel to me like that late of a hit. It was violent, and I think that's why it got called, because he knocked the shit out of Ryan Tannehill. But like, I don't, there were big plays in the game, obviously, but I don't think it's like, oh, they have a discipline problem or, oh, like this is unacceptable. Like, I'm okay with those hits. The Derwin one, he had a similar play, not like super similar, but a similar like type hit in the Indy game that he got ejected for. I rewatched it a million times. He led with his head. I know like everyone on Twitter was getting on me about, oh, he led with his shoulder. Like he didn't. He didn't. Go rewatch the replay. Put it in slow-mo. The first thing that makes contact with the receiver is Derwin's helmet, and it's right crown of the helmet, right onto the receiver's helmet. Go watch it. So, but again, like I think that play to me, when talking to Brandon Staley in the press conference, is like he was more okay with that than the roughing the passers. To me, like I understand that's how Derwin plays, and you don't want to take that away from him because he is that type of tone setter on defense. And like you deliver a hit like that, and players running over the middle are going to be much more scared the next time they're in that position. But I think in that situation, and it's like, again, like there's a lot of nuance here because like it's bang, bang, it's fast. Like you want your players playing fast. You want them playing physical, but it's third and long. They run a slant. Like, can you break up the play without like mashing the guy's head with your helmet? Maybe. But like, there's no question that those penalties were massive swings in the game. But like, I don't think you can answer the question like, yeah, it's a discipline problem. There's just a ton of nuance to it. And you have to take these individual plays one at a time, break them down, figure out what happened, and sort of sort through all of the detail. I do, at least for the job that I do, and really like try and be nuanced about how you sort of approach these. But that's sort of my take on the penalties in the game. JC is terrible. I mean, again, like I know not all of you subscribe to The Athletic. If you want to, click the link below. We're doing a $1 a month deal through the end of the month. I wrote like a whole mailbag response on JC, and someone asked me about, what are the expectations? And I was like, he's coming off an unprecedented injury. It's a very severe injury. He returned to the field in like 8-9 months. It's going to be a process. And like on the range of outcomes, the likeliest one was that he was going to come out there and have some rust. And I think that's what we're seeing. And what I also wrote about and have talked about, and I think I talked about this in the last Hops with Pop, is that like there's two parts to it too. Like, yeah, he has to be physically ready to play, but he also, and this is a big part of it, like has to regain confidence in himself as a player and in his knee. And to go out there and not think about any of it is really difficult. And that's going to affect how a guy plays. Unfortunately, like the only way to work through that and to regain confidence is to be on the field. So the Chargers, in a sense, are in a tough spot where it's like, well, this guy has to play for us. We're paying him a ton of money to be our number one corner. Like, they feel like he has to be out there, right? And in order to get him to that spot where they feel like he can be, the only way to do that is for him to play. And so you have to work through some of that stuff. And again, like, okay, yes, 1-1, 2-0. This is the 9th or 10th bullet point, right? And hey, like JC Jackson hasn't been great, but he's working through it. At 0-2, all of a sudden it takes on a much different tone, right? It's more dire. And so, but he's going to get there at his own pace. But the only way to get him there is for him to play. So you got to throw him out there. Now, like, if it gets, if it's 0-3 and JC Jackson is still not, anywhere close to where you need him to be, then I think the Chargers sort of have to reevaluate because circumstances are going to dictate it. But right now, like, that's where it's at. And, I didn't think he was particularly bad against the Titans. Again, I have to watch the film because it's not up on NFL Plus yet. But I sound like a coach now. Go to watch the film. But it's true. I mean, you can't really like evaluate a player thoroughly without watching the film. So, but anyway. All right, I'll do 2 more questions because I got to go cook this falafel and eat dinner. Dinner's important. Don't be afraid to get some artwork up on those walls. I feel like this is part of the character of Hops with Pop. Like bare bones production quality in a like white room with one photo on the wall of the Brooklyn Bridge that you can't see because I'm in front of it. And we're just here having a beer and talking ball, man. Like it, I'm not about bells and whistles. All right? It's about information. It's about telling the truth. But yeah, I do need some art on the walls. You're right. What's a falafel? Falafel is a chickpea based Mediterranean kind of like fried ball of goodness. That was a terrible explanation. Any Mediterranean folks in the chat want to do a better explanation of what falafel is? Yeah, Arabic food. There you go. What's the difference between a chickpea and a garbanzo bean? There is no difference. Same thing. I didn't know that though. The first time I went to go buy chickpeas in a supermarket, I walked around for about 20 minutes until I mustered up the courage to ask the guy, "Do you not have chickpeas?" And then he walked me over and he pointed to the garbanzo beans. And that's how I learned. Wow. Mike P's mind is blown. He never knew. See? Come full circle, Mike P. All right. One more question. Anybody got a good one? Need some hummus. I made homemade hummus. Got to do it homemade. Best Korean food recommendation. So West Side, Mom and Bop for like bibimbap and tteokbokki. And then like Korean barbecue in Koreatown. My favorite spot is Road to Seoul. Really good price point. They do a good job there, and they play house bangers, which is what's important. Barry Egan says, "Dude, shut up and answer the football questions." Barry, are you new here? Because when you say stuff like that in the chat, there's only one thing we can do. Everyone together now. Ban. 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 Oh no, I lost it. Where is he? Ban. Ban. Oh, I lost. Oh, here he is. Okay. Ban. 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 I forgot how to do this. Is he in timeout? God, I'm rusty here, guys. All right, one more question. I want to end on a good one. Why was Herbert's arm taped up? He has like a turf burn on his forearm. At least I think it's a turf burn. Okay, let's end there. Best matchup to watch in the game this weekend. So it's got to be Justin Jefferson. So Jefferson had 9 catches for 143 yards when the Chargers lost to the Vikings in 2021. He is the best receiver in the NFL. The Chargers are struggling on pass defense. But like this feels like a game where everyone expects one thing to happen, and then Brandon Staley comes out with just like an epic game plan. I mean, it happened against, San Francisco. I know they lost that game, but they had no business being in that game. And the way they defended the run was ridiculous considering the personnel that they had. They had multiple injuries in that game. They didn't have Austin Johnson. Tito Abonia went down. By the end of the game, they had three healthy interior defensive linemen. Like Braden Fajoko played every snap of the fourth quarter. So, and then the Dolphins game, obviously last year, where, they're down Bryce Callahan. Everyone sort of expected them to get run over, and they had one of the best defensive performances of the season. So how does it happen? I don't know. That's why I don't get paid, millions of dollars to be a coach. But, that's the matchup that I'm going to watch. I have a hard time believing that Justin Jefferson isn't going to get his in this game. But, at the same time, like knowing this team, knowing Brandon Staley and like what he's done in the past, like it could be one of those games where he just puts something together and pulls a game plan out of thin air, and the guys rally and they're able to really shut down Justin Jefferson. I don't know if it happens, but that's what I'll be watching. All right, guys. We're over an hour now. Appreciate everyone joining. If you are not subscribed to The Athletic, that's where I do all of my work. Click the link below. $1 a month through the end of September. It's the best deal we will do all year. I don't know when we're going to do another deal. So if you're on the fence, now's the time. Click the link, subscribe. It's $1 a month. People in the chat, you let them know. Is it worth it? I think it's worth it. I try very hard and I work very hard to make it worth it. But yeah, we'll leave it there. Click the link, subscribe. Love you all. Peace out.